To address the elephant in the stream, there's an ongoing criminal case with me, as has been released in some ways. There's another ongoing matter that runs parallel to that. It involves my family, and people are very, very eager and keen to have a bunch of details about my children, which, I guess if that's what they want to do, that's what they're going to do. As far as that goes, anyone who wants this thing done and taken care of and expects me to have this thing worked out in some sort of quick fashion, welcome to the legal process and the speed of government. It is not in the hands of us happy, idle citizens. It is in the hands of bureaucrats who actually have never passed up a cheese sandwich and never will. They take their time on everything and blame you for it. They do. I don't know how else to say it. You're going to have to, at some point, encounter government in some way, and I pray to God it's not in the way that I've had to. People are saying that I'm making statements like this as some sort of conspiracy sort of accusation, or saying that there is some sort of plot against me or whatever. I mean, I have no fucking idea. I haven't ever claimed that. Other people have suggested shit like that. Go talk to them about those theories. As for me and my claims, they're very, very simple. I have constitutional rights. I stand accused by my government of acts to which I have not admitted. The government bears the burden of proving those acts beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal matter, and a slightly lower but still high standard in the ongoing civil matter. Until they do those things, people will make up the decisions about me and any actions, alleged or unalleged, that they want under the circumstances. There's nothing I can do to prevent it. There's very little I can even do to address it. I started to say this the other night, but I will say it again because it bears repeating. The government has the unfettered ability to accuse the citizen. The citizen does not have an unfettered ability to respond to government. Though we have freedom of speech, everything we say that we are free to say can be used against you once you stand accused. Actually, technically before you stand accused, but certainly once you do. And with that realization, it means that anything the government says about you may have to go unanswered for an extended period of time. But there are answers that I can give to questions that people have that are very generic about my case. And so I can clear up some common misconceptions here right now. Anyone who suggests that I ever have refused an ordered drug test from the government is incorrect. I've complied with every ordered drug test from the government. And yes, that means I have actually taken drug tests and submitted them to the government. I know it's wild to consider, but that has happened. So any reports that I'm not doing that are flat out false. I don't care what insider sources people have. I don't care what other suggestions there are, but any suggestion that I am not doing that, like I'm adamantly refusing a court-ordered drug test, are completely incorrect. Shockingly, they're all clean. I know it's really hard to believe, but they're all clean. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to say it any other way, but the government has a problem in my case, and that is that they cannot show any evidence of drug use. And you'll find it absent in any of the documents. That's on the government. If they decide they need to show that, then they will attempt to show it. You guys know what I stand accused of. You guys can go look it up. If you do not know, I'm not going to rehash it here. So far, I am not guilty. If the government decides that they can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, that remains to be seen, but there's a long way to go in that process. The status of my case is very simply as follows. The next criminal hearing that I have is on August 21st. This is public information. It's pretty easy to find. That August 21st hearing is called a contested omnibus, and that is a Rule 11 hearing in Minnesota, which means it is your chance to bring any dispositive pretrial motions. Dispositive pretrial motions means the resolution of the motion could resolve the entire case. That would be dispositive, right? So if you have a motion to dismiss, for example, and you win the motion to dismiss, the case would be over. That would be a dispositive motion. That's the limit for them outside of very, very limited other circumstances. That will be on August 21st. Most people's questions about my criminal case, questions that they have for me, what are you going to do about this? What about this? What about this? Those things will be addressed largely at that hearing. That's what it's for. We will be filing paperwork ahead of that hearing if there's anything that needs to be addressed. And if it is not resolved at that hearing, it will go on to be calendared for trial. When will that be? I have no idea. That's on the court and the court's calendar. How long of a trial the state thinks, how long the state thinks the trial will take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are many steps from that spot. People want that spot to be done. They want it to be occupied. They want some sort of ownership or explanation or whatever, and you're just never going to get it prior to that, because I cannot talk about that stuff in my own interest and in the interest of my children, my family, everything. This all has to be done properly. So to all of you who have those wonderful, very concerned questions, I have to tell you, you'll just have to wait and watch the show unfold. Like I said, there are general things that I can talk to you about, sure. Simple matters of fact. And there are actually simple matters of misrepresented facts in the documents that you guys have read. And some of those I can certainly address. I just did in regards to any drug testing, et cetera, et cetera. Any suggestion that I refused a drug test is erroneous. I was not required to take any drug test by the government up until a certain point. Once that was ordered, which I believe was on June 7th, I've complied with all of them. The government had no right to ask me or demand me or order me to take a drug test prior to that. And I did not refuse to take anything that they requested. So that being said, I hope that clears that up. I know it won't. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, wow, in the order, it said this. Well, that's funny. And it's a funny aspect of how cases work, because you see, one side, again, the government gets to say whatever it wants. The other side has maybe an opportunity to respond. That would be me. I would have an opportunity to respond to the government saying something so ludicrous. However, that response might require testimony, and that testimony might be problematic under the circumstances. In that testimony in one area could be used in another area, and it would open doors that aren't ready to be opened at this time. Or it could simply be that the government made a mistake, or they mischaracterized something. And that can be an honest mistake rather than a malicious one. And what you'll find very frequently with government is that most of the mistakes are rather honest. The problem with them is not in their malice. Of course, a malicious government going after you would be tyranny. I have not claimed this to be the case. I've specifically stated that the system is levied against the citizen in a way that makes you feel oppressed, because it does. It is a grinding system that crushes you into nothing. The imbalance of power between an individual citizen, even one represented by a badass attorney or whatever the hell you want to say, versus a government is astronomical. And it's why we put higher burdens on the government. We can wax poetic all day about just how effective those burdens are and how effectively they're adhered to in the actual judicial process. There's a long fucking conversation to have there, and it existed long before my case, and it'll exist long after my case. the balance of power in government restrictions that can only be enforced on the government by itself has always been a logical problem with governance. If the only police of the police is the police, how effective are they at policing themselves? Our founders tried to recognize this and set up branches of government both horizontally, I guess, vertically and horizontally. That's the Republican form of our multi-house government, right? You have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. That's your horizontal plane. Your vertical plane would be the federal government, state governments, county governments, municipal governments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down into the smallest, which would be, I guess, the individual themselves. All of those levels of government interact with each other, and all of them have distinct rights and powers. And some of them have rights and powers that check the others. It's a system that's designed to prevent the very concerns that are raised, but it can't be perfect at it. And so you do run across instances where government agents may misstate something, either maliciously or innocently. And unless there is someone specifically there to raise a challenge and then have their credibility outweigh the government's credibility, you're going to have that mistake enter the record. And it takes a lot to correct that. It also takes good counsel. And people do not always have good counsel. People do not always have counsel at all. And all of these things snowball into this mess that we have of a legal system. And in some ways, it really, really sucks. And in other ways, it's still the best one on the entire planet. I don't want to be under the thumb of any legal system, and I would suggest that you probably don't want to either. But those are the realities that we're faced with when we have government and have to interact with it in a hostile or adversarial way. So that's my little soapbox on the issue. But if you hear me suggest that maybe something in some document is not true, well, there's lots of things that aren't true. There's lots of things that get stated by government specifically that aren't true or aren't correct. Correcting those things takes time, it takes effort, and it takes careful strategy and planning. And just know this, I'm fighting literally every single day when I'm not on camera, which you'll note is rare these days. I'm fighting behind the scenes for my family and for my own liberty, and consequently for yours as well, because there are liberty issues at play here. And if people take a step back and look at this situation and say, would I want to be in this situation under those circumstances that the government has used? You can make your decision on how you would answer that. I know how I do, but I'm a little biased in the situation, you could understand. So that being said, if I can correct small mistakes made by government or omissions, whether malicious or incidental, is irrelevant to me. If I can correct those things for you guys, I will. If I can't, look, I'm just not going to answer that question. And that's part of it too. And here's what I know about that. And this is my last bit of blabbering about it before we start getting into some topics of choice tonight is this. I 100% realize that court and the court of public opinion are completely different. And I 100% realize that people will judge me absent any of the rules or restrictions that are imposed on government. If I don't say something, the public will make a judgment about that. And the consequence is that I have to just deal with it. You're not going to catch me complaining too much. Now, if people have basic reading issues, I may try and correct them. Or people have basic legal misunderstandings, I may try and correct them. Here's a friendly one to whoever runs the Gunt News Network. You said in your tweet about the order that was released the other day that neither I nor my wife intervened on behalf of our children. There's a very simple reason why. An intervener is a non-party to the suit who would then step in the place of a party to take over the suit if they had some sort of interest. Taking it out of the context of my case, and I said this earlier on Locals. If you're watching on Locals, I'm sorry, you're probably bored with this. Taking it out of the context of my case and putting it in the context of, say, an election fraud lawsuit like we saw in 2020. You may have a statute which requires the Secretary of State to bring suit against the state government or the State Board of Elections if there's some sort of maybe very close result that will trigger a mandatory runoff that may require legal action from one party. Now, let's say that a Democrat Secretary of State is required by law to bring suit against a candidate who just won the Democratic election in a state, or I guess against the Elections Commission for a candidate of their same party. The presumption would be they may not go on against their own party very hard. So what you'll often find in that case is the opposing party or the opposing party candidate would intervene in the lawsuit, and they would then make sure that the lawsuit is pursued vigorously. Or, for example, if a Secretary of State is sued about maybe a gun policy, a highly volatile or controversial issue, you may have a gun rights activist group take over in that lawsuit because that might be a more vigorous defense or offense in the suit. That's an intervener. So if you say that we have not intervened on behalf of our children, that would be, I guess, technically correct, but that's only because we cannot intervene. We are already parties to that suit. So just a minor correction of a legal misunderstanding, things like that I can talk about, and I can try and clear up and provide a little bit of an educational aspect to them. Going beyond that, obviously, I'm not going to talk legal strategy. I can't talk about various disagreements I may have with things that are presented as fact, but those will be addressed in the courtroom or in motion practice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. With all that, I do thank everybody for their continued most important thing, which is offers of prayers, good thoughts, and support for my family, particularly my children. This is not a fun time for them. And as much of it as it's not a fun time for me, they're far more important than I ever have been. That's always been true in my entire life. People can decide what they will based on the facts that they see and what they determine about me and anybody else. I can't stop that, but I know it's true. And, that's all that really matters at this point, because I'm sorry to say this, your opinion doesn't mean fucking shit. No matter who you are out there, if you're not my government involved in my case with my family, your opinion is going to take a back burner to everything else I need to do. And if that means you have a negative opinion of me, cool. See, on the flip side, all will out at some point. And that's what I keep telling people. All will eventually out. Sucks for me that I have to wait for a long time to do it, but hey, them's the ropes. With that,